Aldermen and women are present. Please join with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'd like to invite Chief Mitchell to the podium to begin the swearing in of our newest firefighter and paramedic, Jordan.
Thank you, Mayor. One of our full-time firefighter paramedics, Sam Lorge, has submitted his resignation as a full-time, but he's going to stay on with us part-time due to educational opportunities that he had. So to replace him, we've asked one of our part-time gentlemen who's gone through our testing process, Jordan LeBoy, to be our next career firefighter. So this is Jordan and his father, Lee, was it? And if you want to go up, and Susan Westerbeek, our city clerk, will administer the oath of office, and then we'll have your badge pinned. I don't think Jordan knew that all these people came here just to see him get sworn in.
Congratulations. Jordan, welcome to Port Washington, the Port Washington Fire Department. We greatly appreciate your willingness to serve our community. Dad, as I was watching you put that pin on, I'm thinking that it probably a blink of an eye when you clipped him in his car seat at the hospital for the first time. Probably easier than putting that badge on there. So we're grateful for you for raising a great son, and we are very excited that you're going to serve us here in the city of Port Washington and help us take care of our awesome residents. And Chief, again, and Police and Fire Commission, we appreciate you moving the ceremony over here so we can introduce our newest firefighters, EMT, and police officers to our community. So we look forward to seeing you on the road. We'll pray for your safety, and we wish you the best of luck. So thank you for coming tonight. I don't know if you're actually going to stay for the whole meeting, but we really don't haze new people like that. So you are all welcome to go. Chief, I don't know if you're having a sheet cake or coffee someplace, but yes. Well, Alderman Sigler would appreciate if you'd save him a piece. All right, so let's move into the consent agenda then. I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda, which included the approval of the minutes and the monthly invoice report.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Alderwoman Postel and seconded by Alderman Benning. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None seen. Thank you. Mayor's updates. I've got a couple of different pieces here for us tonight. First, Port Washington was once again awarded the Tree City USA, and recognition for that. I received that letter in the mail last week. So I'd like to thank John Crane from Parks and our arborist for all of his hard work. I really appreciate the fact that the city of Port Washington now has our own nursery and we're growing our own trees. So I think that's a pretty cool little innovation on his part. Reduce our costs, but more importantly, have our own homegrown trees around the city of Port Washington. So it's good to get that recognition once again. A couple of other pieces here. Fish Day. I know you're reading in the paper and seeing online. It's going very, very well. Councilmen and women, if any of you are interested in volunteering, They're short a few volunteers, so they're constantly looking for that. So if you are so interested, go onto the Fish Day website. Anyone else in the audience who'd be interested as well or watching, you can go onto the fishday.org website and sign up there to volunteer for a couple of shifts. Cool thing to do with your family, your teams, etc. And it's just good to see that there's so much local energy to ensure that it's happening. And with that, I also want to thank Port Washington Tourism, who awarded them a $10,000 grant to ensure that they'd hit their financial targets. The other pieces are, I did do a business visit since the last time I was with you, and I also wanted to thank Council President Benning for covering for me while I was on a trip last week for work. And I visited DDW Colorings, which is on the south side of Port Washington in the industrial park. If any of you don't know this, Port Washington proudly is the host of a company that provides the food coloring for 50% of all cheddar cheeses in the world. One, I didn't know until that day that cheddar cheese is artificially colored. Mr. Kraft, back in the day, decided that his different dairies were producing different colors of cheddar cheese, and it was unacceptable, so he began to dye them yellow. Port Washington is the largest importer of the seed ingredient that comes from the Ivory Coast of Africa and South America, and they press that to get a red dye that, when introduced into a milk product, turns yellow. All here in Port Washington. We went to visit them because they are planning on moving their international operations from the United Kingdom and South America back to or into Port Washington. So they're in the old Smith Brothers building in the industrial park, and they're looking to double their size and their output and their impact on the local food business. So they do all custom food colorings right here in Port Washington. They've got about 20 people who work there full time. It's just a really cool place and a cool plant. And just to see that, a lot of people don't really recognize or understand all the things that are made here. Because many of us grew up seeing Simplicity tractors and Boland's mowers and snow blowers. And now we're a significant part of the supply chain of both agriculture, food, and industry. So really proud that they're here in Port Washington and grateful for them. Last thing is council members and community members. If you get an opportunity, the shared revenue pieces, the state of Wisconsin, the Assembly and the Senate came to a compromise with joint finance last week to increase shared revenues. The city of Port Washington and other municipalities have not had the opportunity to increase shared revenues or get a larger share of shared revenues since I was a sophomore in college, 1992. So it's good to see that they're adjusting that. It will be a nice opportunity for the city of Port Washington to help us either pay down some debts or reinvest into our infrastructure. So that'll provide us more revenues in the future. And there are also multiple bills that, as the city of Port Washington is looking to shift and expand our residential opportunities and also support our downtown, there are a couple of different housing bills, workforce housing, revitalization bills that were introduced with bipartisan support. So there's some dollars in there. So if you get a chance, Mr. Brown or I will send you those two bills, and then we'll make sure that you get a chance to look at that. And if you get the opportunity to run into a legislator and have a conversation to reinforce the importance, these would be things that would significantly support the growth of our services in the city of Port Washington for seniors, as well as entry-level workforce housing for young professionals, young men and women, young families who are looking to live in our city. So there's a lot of really great things happening in the legislature that can support our strategic plan. With that, if I don't have any other questions under mayor's business, I'm going to move on. Okay, then we're going to move into 6 officer and staff reports. The department monthly reports are in there. Again, I'm sure I speak for the entire council. Very appreciative of all the different components and different pieces in here. Very, very grateful for the North Beach update, as well as the pool update and all of the different things happening in the city of Port Washington. Cannot wait until we can communicate that to the entire community. Any other questions or thoughts on the officer and staff reports? Mr. Sigwart?
Yeah, I noticed the banners on South Wisconsin Street. They look really sharp, number one. They're sponsored by Prairie's Edge and then a group called Lake Living Redefined. Anybody know who that is?
We can get that for you.
I'm just curious because it must have something to do with the property up there.
Yeah.
They look really nice.
All right. Any other questions? All right, then we're going to move into public comments and appearances. Your comments are welcome. Please remember to limit your comments to 3 minutes, and if you need more time, contact myself or the city administrator. At this time, are there any public comments? Any public comments? Ms. Zaki? Thank you, Ms. Hackey.
Okay. Nancy Hackey, Port Washington, Parkview Lane. I had a couple of questions. I know 14 years ago, we negotiated an agreement with We Energies for Coldock Park. And at that time, the Hickok Design Group gave us a futuristic design that we had studied for analysis, and the master plan was to be done by 2020. Obviously, we have done some things, but nothing to do with the master plan that we had talked about at that time. My question is, and I know Mr. Eberhard and Mr. Newmeyer at that time, when the negotiation was with We Energies, for Coldock Park. Do we own Coldock Park? Because we've been talking about, we do not own it, I know that. But specifically, maybe Eric, you know, can have a comment, because we've been talking about using it like it is our own and putting a harbor there, changing our harbor. So I wanted to know about the specifics of the lease and the sublease agreement between the state of Wisconsin and We Energies and us.
So we can't respond in public comments,
Okay.
but I think when we get to the public hearing around the downtown plan, I can maybe wiggle that in there.
Well, I believe my comment is we do not own this. It's a lease right now. And I'm very worried about moving the harbor over there on a piece of land that is a lease agreement. And I believe it was a 50-year lease at that time. I have communicated, it's in open records. I haven't looked at the agreement myself, but I'm just very concerned about taking our beautiful harbor right now and changing it. And I worry about that land that if we would move it, putting condos there, and it's irreversible if we don't have the opportunity to come back to that land. And so it's just my concern.
Thank you, Mrs. Hackey.
Okay.
Other public comments? Yes, sir. So there is a hearing scheduled in the council meeting for that. If there are other comments on the master plan, there's the opportunity to speak then, or you can speak now. Yes, sir. Yes. Okay, excellent. Any other public comments or concerns? All right, we're going to move into the agenda then. 8A from standing council committees, the Administration Committee, Ordinance 1, 2023-14, an ordinance adopting a revision and codification of the ordinances of the City of Port Washington. This is the first reading. The issue is that the City of Port Washington's current municipal code has been updated annually by ordinance adoptions over decades. The previous codification for renumbering was completed and adopted on December 4th, 1984 by Ordinance 84-9, an ordinance amending the codified general ordinance and bylaws of the City of Port Washington. This current review of our municipal code and recodification process became a necessity as over time technical corrections need to be made and integrated for the code to be fully completed. The city clerk requests that the Common Council approve the ordinance in the next reading. Ms. Westerbeek, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Knightsky. As all of you know, this has been a number of years in the making. I've been through recodifying a code when I was the town clerk for the town of Port Washington, and that was many years in a much smaller community. So I appreciate everyone's patience. It is a worthy cause and worth the wait, so to speak. So it becomes a necessity over many, many decades when a code is not codified. There are technical changes that need to be made. There might be small text changes that need to be made. Over time, the state law changes, federal law changes, administrative code changes, things that are not in our control at the local level, obviously. But many things in our code do relate to those laws, and they do affect what we do here. So, as you know, over time, we've had our municipal code available on our website, and then as we've been approving ordinances the last number of years, the ordinances for the changes have also been posted on the website. When this is complete and finally adopted, we will have what's called an E-code. It will be completely searchable and available on our website, and will be absolutely current with every passing of an ordinance. Once I have sent that to General Code, who is our vendor, they will update the E-code immediately. And then after a few months and on the schedule that we select, they will update the ordinances and incorporate them into the master code, which is a continually evolving document because of ordinances that are passed annually. And so on a schedule that we choose, they will fully update that. And then we will have pretty much real-time and always current code. And that's used by the city staff daily. It could be something we're working on with properties. It could be something the police department is working on with residents. It could be something happening with the parks. Our code is the laws of the city. So we're at the point now where we have put the code out in draft form, final draft form on the website. I realize that it's 770-some pages, and there's a Schedule A that details out the changes that have been worked on. Going forward, there'll be a second read. We'll have a public hearing. We have a schedule that we have laid out for that, and then once approved, it will be published in the Ozaki Press as required for all ordinances, because it's an ordinance change in and of itself. And then the code will be live, and we will be able to work through E-code 360 website, as well as the final draft. So we do have a few code books that have been made. We only have a few for staff here because they take time, and every single change has to be updated or the code isn't current. So primarily, we'll be working off of our E-code going forward, and work with General Code annually going forward. They've been tremendous to work with. They're very skilled. The company's been around many years and has helped many, many municipalities. Our editor was outstanding and very, very thorough. So with that, I'm sure the city attorney, who also worked diligently on this project and provided a very detailed memo, may have some comments to add to that.
Floor was just yielded to you. How exciting.
That is great, thank you. Well, kudos to the city clerk for her patience and diligence throughout this arduous process. I would commend my memo to all of you. If you haven't read it, please do so. It gives you the background of how we got here as a council. It talks about the purposes of recodification, sets forth the law and procedure governing the process, and how we can implement this going forward. I would just add a couple of footnotes, if I may. For those of the alders who may be wondering in the back of their mind, what was the impetus behind these changes? I can tell you that in my view, 90 to 95% of all of these changes were made at the suggestion of the professional editors from General Code, whose knowledge we all benefited from. These changes were not the product of the city clerk and I attempting to introduce substantive changes into our city code. The last thing I want to say is, and perhaps the council is wondering this too, one or more of you, what is the council to do with all of this? What is your role? Simply this: to review these technical, grammatical, typographical corrections and the structural reorganization, renumbering of the code, and understand that many of these changes are based on changes in law. They're not discretionary. A lot of what municipalities used to be able to regulate has been preempted by state law, for good or for ill. And so in the end, having considered those things, it would fall to the Common Council to approve the new code with these many changes. In short, you're being called upon to update and modernize the code of the city of Port Washington. Thank you.
Any questions, clarifications for the clerk or council?
I have a question.
Yes.
I always try to speak English. This one I can't understand, so maybe either between Susan or Mr. Everhart, if they could help me. Section 20-27B in your summary, it says it's speaking directly to the chief and the powers of the chief, and it says the other officers shall assist the chief in the discharge of his duties, and in case of the absence or inability to act of the chief. Should that be as the chief, or is that preposition correct?
That is correct. It's only referring to the inability of the chief to carry out his or her functions. And in that event, these other command team members would step up. So it is correct as written.
Thank you.
Other questions? Clarifications? I have one for council, and that is, looking back here at the fact that the last time any serious effort went into this was in 1984-ish. My question is, because eighth grade was a pretty great year for me. My question is it appropriate to put into the code that the council will annually review and adopt?
I can jump in. 1984 was a great year too, because it was the year I was born. So that's pretty awesome. I'm pretty excited about
Yeah.
that.
George Orwell has a few things to say as well.
But specific to the question, there is kind of two phases to this whole process. There's the process that Susan and the city attorney have undertaken, which we're discussing here this evening. And then the second phase is through a series of years. I don't want to say how many years because it's going to take us a long time. We're going to substantively go through all the chapters of the code. So the idea is that once we get done with that process, then it's more of kind of, I would say, a smaller type of process where we're looking at very specific issues because we're current and up to date on things. But the intention is to, again, substantively review everything and get into some type of iterative process where we're reviewing this, hopefully not every 40 years.
And I appreciate that. My wondering is, about putting in that aspiration into policy or ordinance to ensure that, we'll get to that. This happens a lot in like local government, school districts, and then all of a sudden they wake up one day and they read a law that says the driver of each taxi cab shall wear a cap at all times while operating a taxi cab with the name of the owner on said taxi cab legibly printed thereon. That just got taken out. We haven't had a cab here since I was like in eighth grade. So, and it was Elsie. That was the name of the driver. I don't think she wore a cap. But my point is, so like I understand the aspiration, but that's dependent upon like the 9 of us always being here. And so I would just ask if that's a potential consideration. I don't know where it's appropriate. I don't know if that gets numbered into this document or, into ordinance itself that the council has to review, and maybe not annually, but on a set cadence there in ordinance so that we're held accountable for that stewardship. I totally get putting in place a project map and a Gantt chart, but I'm not going to die on that hill. I'll be 93 in 40 years, and I don't want to come down here and take 3 minutes to yell at everybody. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, the next reading will be at our next council meeting in July. All right, moving on to B1, Finance and License Committee, consideration and possible action on appointment of a successor agent permit holder, Port Washington Yacht Club, 430 North Lake Street. The Finance and License Committee and Common Council are being asked to review and approve a request from the Port Washington Yacht Club to appoint a successor agent for their alcohol establishment license. The city clerk has reviewed the request and recommends approval as presented. Susan?
This request came in the latter part of last week. There's been a change, or there's a change occurring at this time at the Port Washington Yacht Club where the alcohol agent will no longer be holding that position in the next few weeks. So this is an opportunity for the Finance and License Committee and Common Council to take on their appointment of successor request for agent. They have filed required paperwork, and that is all in order. There is a background check that has been sent for the agent they are proposing. I am waiting for that to be returned, so I ask that this evening if you do go ahead and approve this appointment of successor agent Terry D. White for the Port Washington Yacht Club, that you do so subject to the background check being approved by Police Chief Hingus.
Any questions or concerns? Mr. Plater?
Yep. I would make a motion to approve the appointment of a successor agent contingent upon the approval of the background check.
All right, so there's a motion for Mr. Pleitner for the successor agent permit holder to be moved to Mr. White, contingent upon background check. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Postle. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Finance and Licensing Committee, consideration and possible action on the appropriation of one-time revenues. Should the Common Council appropriate $75,000 from one-time revenues to conduct a space needs analysis, site assessment, and concept plan for a future public safety complex? The staff is recommending this. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So maybe similar to the recodification, this is another topic that has been ongoing and discussed over a series of years, and that is a fire department / police station. And we've gotten to a point now where, through the conversations that the council has had in the past year with regard to strategic governance initiatives, where we're looking at a public safety complex with a working group of fire chiefs, Alderman Benning and Newmeyer, along with PFC Chair Beaver, and the Director of Public Works and myself. We've laid out a timetable to begin this phase of looking at this project. So what we're doing here tonight is asking the council to appropriate $75,000 of one-time revenue from the sale of land related to the Prairie's Edge development. And what we would do if this is approved tonight is release a request for qualifications tomorrow that outlines a scope of work that's split into two phases, whereby a consultant would be asked to complete a space needs analysis, a site assessment, and a concept plan for a public safety complex. And then later in August, we would come back with the preferred firm along with a contract to undertake that work. So with that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And the recommended motion would be I move that $75,000 of one-time revenues from the sale of land be appropriated for the designated purpose, or motion to accept staff's recommendation.
Any questions for Mr. Brown?
I'd make that motion.
There's a motion. Mr. Alderman Newmeyer, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Benning. Any questions or concerns on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Excellent, motion passes. I do appreciate this, Mr. Brown, as well as the two council members who stepped into the leadership role to ensure this happens. Look forward to the collaboration with PFC, and I think it's really important that the city of Port Washington leads in fire and safety with state-of-the-art facilities to ensure we can attract and retain the best people, as well as serve our community and our region in a great way. So this is an important piece for Port Washington, a good step forward. Okay, with that, we're going to move into boards and commissions, and from the Planning Commission, a public hearing to accept public comments on the proposed Port Washington downtown and lakefront plan, which is to be added to the City of Port Washington Comprehensive Plan for 2025. Notice is hereby given that this evening we will be opening that hearing. At this point, I will call that hearing to order. We are now in session for the public hearing on the acceptance of the downtown plan. Are there any speakers in favor? Are there any speakers in favor? Are there any speakers in favor? All right. Well, are there any speakers against? This is your time, sir, if you had something to say about the downtown plan, or neutral. So if you'd like to step to the podium up there and name, address, rank, and serial number, and then we can keep going.
Okay.
And you have 3 minutes to share with us your thoughts and ideas.
Yeah. Richard Lasky, 415 North Lake Street, Apartment 104. I've lived in Port Washington since 1975, and I have a boat in the marina. I do a lot of fishing, and I love this town. My question is, on this master plan, you just mentioned that one piece about the downtown, what was it, downtown?
Downtown plan?
Yeah. Now, in this proposal that we've all been presented, there's the downtown plan, there's the marina plan. Are these each being treated separately? Downtown is one plan, marina is another plan?
They're one and the same.
Oh, they're one and the same. Okay. Okay, well, I guess well then, I would be opposed to the plan. And my question is to the council, what is the hurry to have a vote to proceed with this issue? Would it be possible to have an advisory referendum and ask the residents of Port Washington how many people are really in favor of this plan? I love this town and the small town nature that it is. That's why I lived here. But how many people are really in favor of this? That's my one question. Could there be an advisory referendum? Is that possible?
Thank you. And we can't respond to the questions,
Okay.
but when we get to the agenda item, I'll provide some clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other speakers against? There's now a line forming. Mr. Hewall.
Name's Craig Heatwall. I live on Holden Street, 525. Lived here my whole life. My family's been here for over 150 years, so I have quite a commitment to Port Washington. I love it dearly, but I'm very concerned that a full adoption or partially full adoption of this plan, and I went through it yesterday as best I could in an hour or two, so it's going to take a lot more work, but I'm patently against it as it stands. I believe that it'll destroy Port Washington if it were to actively come forward, ruin our heritage and our uniqueness as a city in Wisconsin. And so I would oppose it on that grounds. I would like to recommend, if the council is interested in this, in a review of the cost of this. I think the whole plan is going to be tens of millions of dollars. But what I'm worried about more is the impact on public services. How much is that going to spill over to our tax bill? When, if you look at that plan, there are buildings after buildings being put in and streets being closed and bicycles riding all over town and bridges across the harbor. And I just can't see how that's going to not impact our roads and bridges and police and fire and all of those factors. So I would ask for a complete review by the board on the meeting place of the cost of this program and the expense it's going to leave in the pockets of the taxpayers. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hewall.
Kendall D. Filan, 648 Evergreen Terrace. I guess, first of all, I thought this was going to be a Q&A kind of a deal, but oh well. Roundabout on Granite Avenue, Wisconsin. Why? Is it a a traffic study done? Have there been great fatalities there? Why do you need a roundabout there? Also, going along with the previous speaker, a lot of money being talked about here, and I'm just wondering about how much of this is going to be TIFs. I always look at those as kind of a form of municipal welfare, that if these people were really good investors, would they not have the backing to have the money to go along with their proposal, as opposed to, well, I'll do it if you give me $7 million and I don't have to pay taxes for X amount of years. And the problem with that is, in my view, is it's kicking the can down the road, in that you build a big housing deal and the fire chief says, well, we've increased our population by whatever studies, we need more engines, we need more personnel. Police department says, well, by our studies, we have this many more people, we need new squad cars, we need more officers. So now you're sucking money that needs to be provided for public safety, which isn't being repaid for several years down the pike. I didn't get a real good look at the plan, but I'm just wondering if in this great time of going on, if there's any arrangements for electrical vehicle charging stations. The government is saying we're ramming electric vehicles down our throats, but what is the plan in the city of Port Washington to have one? As far as I know, at this point, there are none. I will stand corrected if need be, or whatever. I'm always curious about the parking situation, especially about Inventors Pub, if and when that gets going. Where are those people going to park? I just hope that, I know there's been studies in the past that have been done on the parking plan, and everybody says, oh, it's great, we don't have any problems, there's no problem with parking. I just wish that you would contract with somebody other than Stevie Wonder for the next parking plan. And with that, I will, just under grammatical, alders, last time I looked, that was a tree. So if you want to be called alders, well, you can all be trees, that's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other speakers against? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jerry Zarin, up at 124 South Eva Street. I've kind of highlighted, but I don't have that much time, right? But I will touch base with the roundabout situation, which was grave concern to me. I sold real estate in this community for 30 years, and one of the things that sold this community all the time was driving down Grand Avenue and seeing that view of a lake. You're going to put a roundabout there where you're going to kind of impede that view, I would say. And again, I haven't seen a whole lot of incidents reported in any of the papers as to traffic incidents in that corner. So the space that you'd use for a roundabout, I just totally don't understand that. Also, certainly, I'm concerned about the interest that you have in the launch pad at Cold Dock Park. I don't think that would be beneficial for anybody. So it was my bad. I missed the presentation, and I apologize for that, and I certainly missed the last one. But I hope you continue some sort of public hearing and maybe another presentation, because I think the city still needs to hear more. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
My name is Jim Searles. I live at 712 West Grand. I've lived in Port since 1979, so I guess we're no longer newcomers. I came down here tonight not really knowing exactly what to expect or what to think. Hearing the two biggest things that concern me with all of this is a roundabout on Grand and Wisconsin. I had supper tonight over at Cousins, and I realize a lot of them are high school kids, but there was one older manager there, and I asked him about it. I said, what do you guys think about that? They knew nothing about it. So
you know, wouldn't you have gone to the key stakeholders? You know, Beanies, Cousins, the other place there across from Cousins, and at least given them some input and gotten some feedback? We lost the beautiful green space that's now going to be that brew pub. I wouldn't want to have bought one of those $500,000 condos across the street, and now I can't see the lake. You know, you lost that green space, and now they want to add launch and parking in Coal Dock Park. You know, I also listened to, as you were talking about the codification and that it was 40 years. I realize you can, you know, push and push and push, and 40 years from now, you say, well, geez, didn't we have a master plan at some point in time? But if you're going to do something, either do it in chunks or don't rush it. I mean, you know, a year down the road isn't going to be the end of it. You know, get the public input, get the people to buy into it. I don't know how many of you were around. We moved to town just about the time the lawsuit over the marina was. Now that worked out. The end result was a beautiful marina. But stop and think about the damage it did to relations here in the town. This could be another one of those situations. I really think so. You need to get more input. I mean, we got a whole bunch of people here, but look at us. We're all the old farts, pardon my language. You know, I mean, the younger people that are going to be paying the taxes on this 30 years from now aren't here. So that's
you,
just
sir.
my 2 cents. Thank you.
We prefer seasoned citizens. Any other comments against? Any neutral comments? Oh, I guess my time's up. All right, so I'm going to close this hearing. We're going to move into the next agenda item, which is the ordinance 2023-13, an ordinance adopting the Port Washington Downtown and Lakefront Plan dated June 20th, 2023, as amended, as an amendment and supplement to the City of Port Washington Comprehensive Plan for 2035. The Common Council is being asked to adopt the Port Washington Downtown and Lakefront Plan via approval of the ordinance. The staff recommends approval of the ordinance. One thing I just want to clarify as we enter discussion on this for the community members is, one, thank you for coming out tonight. And two is, if the council adopts this plan is an exercise in ideas. There's nothing in here that's static. Roundabout was a bullet point in the conversation. It's not in our strategic plan. It's not funded. Neither is changing the harbor, certainly not touching Coal Dock Park. And the ideas that were generated, there were multiple community sessions with a lot of different community input and ideas run out by that consultant agency, and those things were put in place. Again, this document or the ordinance that will be adopted is not official in anything other than a visionary tool for future development to help guide people of what we would tolerate or what we wouldn't tolerate. And frankly, I don't think there's too many people up here, and I can't speak for my council members, but I can speak for myself. I'm not going to let anything happen to that Coal Dock Park as long as I'm mayor. Development downtown, we've kind of shut the door on heights and variances and significant shifts. We've not had any development for anything else on the lakefront itself in the downtown area, and I don't think I would entertain that, as would others. Again, I can't speak for everyone else. But at the end of the day, this is a visioning tool to kind of show, like, hey, if this were to happen, these are some ideas that the community had set forward, whether that be a bridge connecting two parts of the inner harbor and the marina, whether that be, a roundabout here in front of Beanies. They're visions. None of those are realities or adoptions. And the adoption of the plan tonight does not put in motion or set in motion anything within it. Am I accurate, Mr. Harris?
You are correct.
So the idea, again, was to get community feedback, allow people from the community to say, like, that would be neat, this would not be, please don't do this, don't do that. So down the road, as developers or different people come to Port Washington, because we are now a desirable place to grow, live, work, and play, is that if they want to do something and it's not been discussed or included, we want to put the position of our city planner to say, like, that would not be something that we've seen before, and there's going to be a little harder row to hoe in order to get that done. So the adoption of this ordinance tonight, just because so many of you took the time to come out, and I really greatly appreciate your engagement in our local democracy, at the end of the day, this does not set anything within that document in motion. What it does is it adopts that this is a potential vision, and that's really where it starts and ends. And it's an adoption piece with community input. And again, tonight, as the council discusses it, I just want to make sure that you as audience members, because we cannot interact with you in public sessions or comments, understand that, again, this is an exercise in visioning, and that is it. I have one area of disappointment, and that's that we did not envision what would happen if the power plant were to leave Port Washington, because I would love to see that turn into something really remarkable for the city. It is not permanent. Nothing is permanent. So there are different elements of that visioning plan that were laid forward. And I want to thank Bob, council members, and the community members in the room who actually were part of that process, putting sticker dots up, looking at different pieces, and going through that exercise. But I do recognize that some people took to heart what they had seen or read. And again, it's a visioning tool. It is not a strategic document to implement. There won't be any TIFs coming out of the motions tonight. There won't be any new developments, and there certainly is not going to be a roundabout next Wednesday in front of Beanies. And we would, of course, make sure to impact and talk to everybody engaged or involved in any of those developmental pieces. So I normally don't respond to those things, but you're all here tonight, which means that you had a belief set. And at the end of the day, this is an exercise in ideas, not a set strategic plan. So with that, Mr. Harris, your recommendation is for us to approve it, but I want to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My recommendation is to approve the ordinance to adopt what this is the downtown plan document. But if I may, I'd like to give a presentation on the plan and just summarize it, but also get into the, what it is and why it is. And so if I may, and
As long as there's no picture of a roundabout up there, I think we'll all be okay with it.
I think there is.
Yeah, just slide.
That's okay. I like roundabouts.
Mr. Mayor, while Bob's getting set up, I think the key thing here is a lot of those ideas, whether you like them or not, came from citizens in the early planning stages. The consultants refined them, but a lot of the initial ones came from citizens and through the multiple sessions. So that's where we got the input.
Thank you, Mr. Benning.
I clean up my desktop before meetings. So if you were at the Plan Commission or listened to the Plan Commission, I think you'll see and hear a similar presentation. But given the input and what was in the article and some of the comments I've heard were kind of reflective of my tweaking of this presentation. So let me get into a little more detail on the plan and what we're looking at tonight. And so, this is not the first dedicated downtown plan that the city has had. The first one was back in 1962. And there was another one, a refinement of the a marina idea in 77. And 1998 looked at a little more narrow focus on building heights and tweaking zoning codes to reflect that. But all in all, like other plans, there are some good ideas and vision, others not so much. For example, the 1962 plan, it was this first, city plan showing a harbor on the downtown waterfront. It also showed a block-size roundabout to have flow of traffic going in a single direction to avoid congestion. This was a plan during the freeway, when the freeways were being built in Wisconsin, and it was kind of the city's attempts to look at congestion. That was a key topic back then. Again, and as I mentioned, in 1977, 62 was a marina was proposed. 1977, they took a harder look at that marina, but I just want to point out that between it was proposed, and when was actually built was 20 years. And as mentioned a little bit earlier, it was quite the contentious issue, to say the least, as I learned. But in the end, it was quite the asset, and is the asset for the city. And so really that 98 effort was, I think, really one of the more dedicated planning effort for downtown. And as we all know, 25 years later, a quarter of a century later, a lot of change has happened downtown, and change is the only constant. And if we all know the change that has happened, and I think it's, whether we like it or not, change will continue to happen. So why not take a good faith effort and try to collect public comment and look at a plan and some visions and some ideas and try to be a little more active and a little less reactive. So let me just touch on this slide just for a couple minutes. What is this plan? And, right on page 1, it kind of lays that out, or at least lays part of it out, is logically, when one sees a document, it's a city-approved document, public hearing and everything else. We see text, we see recommendations, we see images in those plans. Logically, it's common to think that is what will happen. That is not, the literal plan is not the intent of this plan. This is a long-term vision, 10 years plus and more of a horizon. And as mentioned, it's a series of recommendations and not requirements. So how do we use it? Well, I use it when there is based on plan consistency. Development comes in, and we measure it against the plan, mostly in terms of land use and zoning. And so if it is consistent with the plan, generally consistent with the plan, terrific. That's great. The plan is working, and it runs through that filter of the plan. But not every plan idea works out. Sometimes the better offer comes along, or something just isn't feasible. And plans are always, not often, amended, or simply a recommendation isn't implemented. Rarely are plans sweeping. Headlines notwithstanding, recently there's a collection of recommendations and ideas. But even just talking to our plan consultants, rarely are all of them implemented. As one member on our steering committee, who is a business owner on Grand Avenue, said, even if a couple of these recommendations are actually implemented, I think that's a good win and that's an improvement. But again, we don't expect all plan recommendations to be implemented. I think an analogy I use is, think about, you're putting together your home improvement list. Early on, you take stock of what you would like to see change, or really what needs to be changed in your house. Hopefully, ideally, you share that and you discuss that with your spouse or significant other. There's some back and forth, there's some grudging and some ideas, but ultimately, you kind of come up with, like a home improvement list, a dream home improvement list. And over time, things happen. That addition you wanted to put on the house, well, turns out it's a little more expensive than you thought, and it turns out that maybe it's taking up too much yard that you wanted, and maybe the kids really like the yard. Or vice versa, maybe you did really wanted to improve the front of your house. You wanted to improve that patio front porch, and those are the things that happen. But in the end, after 10 years, that plan, your home improvement plan that you worked on, talked to your friends, family, and your spouse, your significant other, that list changed over time. And it looks a little different from what you started. And that's what a plan, I kind of compare it with. You look at a plan, it's, this idea made sense at the time. Macroeconomics changes, supply, demand, market forces changes, prices change, or in this case, you have a collection of ideas, and then once the time is to take a harder look at these and take a little more closer look and study, turns out maybe it's a little more complicated than anticipated. And so plan A, B, and C just aren't going to work out. Maybe D and E can. And that is the nature of a lot of planning, and this is no different. And so getting into the plan itself, it was this is kind of like that home improvement list. You're sharing it with friends, family, you're sharing it with your spouse. A plan is only as good as its public process, because without a public process, there isn't a credible leg to stand on. It's just simply a plan that put out by the city. But this was over a year-long process. We kicked it off. We provided our consultants with relevant information, and then we really opened it up. We had a number of one-on-one interviews. We had a collection of focus groups, and really we had a community survey that had up to, I want to say, about 350 responses. And I think I mentioned this in the Plan Commission. I think I've done a number of plans before in different communities in the past, and the comments, the earnestness from the comments, the quality of the comments were by far the best I've ever had. And I really took it to heart, and taking all those 350 or more comments, even with or without this plan, it provided me with enough broad brush strokes and opinion to really shape me as I go forward as long as I'm here. It meant that much to me, those comments. And then coming out of that, kind of that public input meeting, we come out with two community meetings, and one near the beginning of the process and one in the middle of the process. And I kind of refer that to as the what do you think process. As we go along with our consulting team and the public input comes in, we kind of at stages come out and say, this is where we're going, this is what we heard, what do you think? And then at the end, there was a plan open house at the end of the process. And that's kind of largely the draft that we see, the final draft that we see now, was shown at that open house. I mentioned that community survey, and I just wanted to take one, little more detailed look at one of the questions that was on there. And it was asked, what kind of plan should this downtown plan be? And this was the most overwhelming, clear-cut answer of all the survey questions. And it was, it was a mix of, let's have a mix of shorter, longer-term recommendations, but also have a generational visionary ideas in that plan too. Again, going back to that idea of just that overall vision to strive for. And, like anything in the plan, you're not gonna like some stuff, you're gonna like some stuff. There's some things I question in that plan, but the idea was to have this collection of a smaller recommendations, smaller ideas, something a little more larger in nature, and then maybe some larger ideas such as the marina and the coal dock, which I'll touch on in a bit. And so our consulting team, it didn't take long to identify 5 key issues they want that the plan should focus on. And 3 of these are obvious: the marina, the waterfront, parking and circulation, Coal Dock Park. But the other 2 I just want to mention real quick. The other one was downtown district and placemaking. And what this means is that in many small towns, it's not uncommon to have that one main street. That is that one active street. Port Washington has an opportunity to kind of have a whole grid, or even just a downtown district. And the idea is to take that vibrancy, that character on Franklin Street, and spread that across around the corner down Grand Avenue, and to another extent, Main Street. So we have that opportunity, we have the street grid, and to take that vibrancy and make it a district, a downtown, if you will, and expand on just that one single corridor. And the other issue was really balancing residential and commercial mix. Right now in B4 zoning, single 2-family residential is not permitted. It's all mixed use. And so a focus of the plan was to balance commercial and mixed use natures and focus that more on kind of that downtown grid I mentioned with Grand, Franklin, and Main. And I identify areas where you could infill with residential, where perhaps those street activated uses like retail and food and beverage need not be front and center in residential, in more office and in more day-to-day services can be on that ground floor. So it's a balance from what there is not now as per zoning. And so real quick, and then there was 3 ways the plan addresses those items: urban design, circulation and parking, and redevelopment. So with urban design, we have this mini plan broken down by districts. Biggest takeaway for me is those blue lines on those block faces. And that was the focus of what they were trying to say, is trying to concentrate those active uses, those active pedestrian uses with food and beverage, retail, and that's kind of the active use of active heart of downtown. And then in those other areas, in the red blocked areas, those could be those offices where you want to encourage, you can encourage residential uses, office uses, or just kind of business services, personal services, that thing. And so you kind of have this mini plan and to focus that vibrancy in that retail, to have a denser, vibrant area, and it creates its own center of gravity, not just on Franklin, but spreading that down Grand and Main. Design guidelines, design example. Right now, our zoning code is bereft of design standards. And as the mayor touched on, having some design guidelines, even having just these samples of architecture, what development could like, kind of gives city staff, gives me something to hang my hat on and promote to a developer. Well, this is what kind of is the nature or the character that would probably fit in downtown Port. And so anything, development should kind of be following along these lines. And so having some architectural details and examples is really helpful. Parking and circulation. Again, this is an issue that's woven throughout the entire plan. But in the end, it's not just parking. The circulation part of it is part of that equation too. And so the question is, can some streets downtown, can they look better, function better, and be safer? Safer was really an important part to some of the stakeholders. I know it was so it kind of became a point of emphasis. And so balancing all those factors, some of the ideas is let's take a look at Main Street. It's kind of the festival street. And if that's the case, and given, the traffic, the use and traffic counts, how it's just kind of off of Franklin and Grand, why not use this idea of a curbless plaza street? The Dutch call it a Woonurf. It's a shared street, a shared active street. And we're seeing more and more of these here, but we already see, if you've been to Europe and larger, Southeast Asian cities, this is not uncommon. And essentially, it's taking the traditional street and just plazaizing it. And then when you have festivals or special occasions, you really have this special place. And these are examples just to the right on this slide, with this shared street, or just having a more celebratory arrival point in your downtown. And then with Port, we're kind of blessed with that blue vista in the background. And so just good urban design. Continuing that theme of, function better, safer, and looking better, the idea of Grand Avenue. If you're familiar with Grand Avenue, and everyone here is, some places on Grand Avenue, it's kind of difficult to walk. Those sidewalks are at a real tough angle. And so the idea was, let's look at taking Grand Avenue and really accommodating the same, Franklin Street-like width. And doing so would kind of even out those slopes and make those sidewalks a little more ADA compliant. But also, it has a good opportunity to provide a wider sidewalk and some tree terraces and give some of those popular dining spots outside a little more breathing room. And then, there was some other ideas for this Grand Avenue, the roundabouts, and I think it was in the Plan Commission slide. I take that back, Jerry. And so the idea, though, was it's this holistic collection of ideas of slowing traffic down and having this, as soon as you kind of hit an arrival point of, say, at the library, you have improved intersections, similar like Franklin Street, and it just kind of gradually, you slow down traffic. The idea of roundabouts is not necessarily a plan requirement, or it's not something that our DPW staff will be taking under study as soon as this plan is arrived. It was just a series of traffic calming ideas to consider for Grand Avenue. Whether we get to that point or not, We don't know. That's up to a closer study. Again, I think someone in the public open house said, let's slow down and we need to study these things. But first you need just an overall vision of what exactly is going to be studied. And so whether roundabouts happen or not, I don't know at this point, but at least it's just an idea that other cities have implemented. And then as far as parking management, there was, obviously that was a main theme. And then we looked at, as part of this planning process, looking at, we did a parking analysis that's still going to be rolled out a bit later this summer. And the idea was, in this thing, that maybe the supply is not so much an issue, it's organizing and managing those parking spots better. Maybe it's looking at an outside vendor, and maybe looking at ensuring that maybe these long-term parkers that are parking in short-term spots like on Franklin and East Main, maybe there's an way to free those up. And so the businesses always have 1 or 2 spots per block where they could have customers or diners coming in. And so that's one way of looking at it. But there are also all more traditional approaches in this plan. More than once, more than twice, the idea was, there's, in our focus groups, our interviews, even in the public input process overall, the idea was, there is parking. It's just a couple, 2 or 3 blocks away from, the water or Franklin Street. And so perhaps if you're a visitor, perhaps, this idea, we could have more attractive, more visible wayfinding and public parking wayfinding, and that'll direct our visitors as we get more and more visitors to say, oh yes, there's parking downtown. So this is more of a collection of a little more comprehensive of looking perhaps at an outside vendor to run a parking management program, or the more traditional approaches like wayfinding, or even the discussion of using marina shuttles to have it be on a circuit of bringing people back to the marina after parking their trailer or whatever 3 blocks away. Parking decks come up. Should there ever be a point where downtown Port would seriously consider that, given the density of its residential and business population? This plan provides suggestions as to where ones could go. Again, suggestions of where they could go and how they fit into any future developments. Again, not requirements or nothing that will be coming out of this plan as a pre-approved recommendation. I touched on redevelopment. Downtowns change. Change is the only constant, or at least you want downtowns change, because otherwise, more often than not, you have a stagnant downtown. And I think a lot of these sites that will probably or could change, these sites susceptible to change, I think they're kind of the ones that really aren't surprises. And our consultants took this time, as part of this planning process, to come up with just looking at a collection of sites that we think will change, and provide a recommended land use, and also provide some designed ideas that could be used for those sites, or maybe they transfer elsewhere downtown. So earlier we looked at there'd be a study for a public safety complex. Well, if that happens, if that study and subsequent actions to make that happen occur, we have half a block or 3/4 of a block that could possibly freed up. And so this is an idea, should that occur. And in this case, it's a collection of townhome style residential homes, kind of with a nice, really attractive layout. And again, this goes back to really infilling and really increasing density downtown, and not at the expense of maybe taking prime restaurant or retail space on that ground floor. The Jade Air site, that's been discussed for a long time. In my files, I have, discussions on this about should that go away, that business consolidate and go somewhere else, or what have you. It's always been an idea that multifamily has been discussed there, be it with apartments or something else. And this plan just kind of takes that older idea and just kind of refines it with an updated concept that we have here. We have two versions here. We have, in this version, we have, what if that industrial building that's there now, what if it's repurposed? What if it's repurposed as residential or even just like a food market to complement downtown? And then they came up with these ideas of really infilling it and creating a little neighborhood just kind of back behind Grand Avenue and really on this creek. And then it carries over it to Wisconsin and Grand Avenue. And the idea is, what if the library, between their studies, that library board, and this body here in the community, thinks it's a good idea to have a new library? And this is a suggestion to show, and that's what the picture shows, just kind of this mixed-use library in the ground with, as part of a development, a multifamily development. And this is the idea if that building doesn't work out and you have that combination of multifamily and townhomes. Again, this is just a really good land use concept, and it's a really good site plan to share, whether this occurs or not, but at least it gives us the guidance should development trends and ideas and decisions go that way. And this one, it doesn't show this, but one susceptible to change site, I think we all know, is that former Piggly Wiggly site. It's that grassy area on Wisconsin. If that owner decides that he has a right to redevelopment, this site kind of shows that. It's kind of depicts a land use of mixed use, which goes in character with downtown, be it office or residential, and some active uses on the ground floor, similar to the use of the building there now, the Dockside Deli that's there now. And so what this shows is, what if the owner or future owners decide, hey, let's redevelop this site. The building is old. This change happened. If they want to pursue this, this is just an idea of really showing a mixed-use building and this cool idea of having two separate buildings rather than one, and then you line it up with the alley, and all of a sudden you start taking advantage of these little alleyways to go with the public alleyways, and all of a sudden you kind of have these little vista points, north and south on your downtown. And again, maybe that building's here 20 years from now. But in the end, this is just a general idea, which I think is a cool idea, should that decision go the other way. And then lastly, just, a long-range vision and ideas to consider. And here's that everyone here has seen or has read about, is this idea of a reprogrammed marina. This is just, and this is a range of ideas. This is kind of, as I call, if the community wants to have the supersize your order with a large fries and large shake. This is a range of ideas to address, it's a popular marina. It's an asset to not only Port, but Southeast Wisconsin. And so what if this idea of expanding the breakwaters and creating, more of these, a larger marina basin for these programmed areas, and also to address, decrease congestion and improve circulation. The idea of that second boat launch, I think during the planning process, the marina guy, as we referred to him, and the consulting team, I think he pointed out that Port Washington is one of the very few marinas on this side of Lake Michigan that has a combined single launch for both charters and just fishing boats. And so the idea for this, of putting that second launch on Cold Dock Park, was to take into advantage an expanded marina, expanded amenities, and then you have improved circulation and added trailer parking. And at the same time, and this is based on feedback during the process, honoring that Hitchcock plan and keeping largely in the spirit of intent of that Hitchcock plan. And in the end, this is a big idea, but in the end, if the price of admission is breaking up that Harbor Walk and breaking up that section of the promenade and Cold Dock Park, if that price of admission is too high for this room and this community to pay, that's fine. It was a good idea, but a closer look, closer study just made that it didn't make that feasible. It doesn't make that happen. And that's what it is. It's just that. It's a conceptual idea, a big idea, at least to consider. And if closer look makes that feasible, that's what happens in these plans. So in the end, where are we? This is a kind of a very deliberate public approval process. Here we are on June 20th, and should this be approved tonight, we will have an approved plan document, and after that is plan implementation. I put TBD because that's exactly what it is, to be determined. In order to have take a look at these big ideas of what they would cost or how they would study, and we'll take a look at some these very closer. Yeah, absolutely. But in the end, you need a plan at least to know what you're going to want to take a closer look at. So plan implementation, should this get approved, is looking at a closer look at what's feasible, what would work now, what will work tomorrow, what will not. Let's prioritize, let's collectively prioritize and study these a little bit closer to see what's feasible and what's not. But at least at this point, we kind of have a vision and some things to row against. And then as we go, that, as I mentioned at the beginning, maybe that home improvement list has to change. And that's exactly what's expected. And with that, that's my presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Harris. While you have that slide up there, just as a reminder to the community that, like number 5, plan implementation, if any elements of the plan were to be taken on by planning or a local developer, there'd be significant voice of the community sought in any major changes, i.e. marina, i.e. Grand Avenue look and feel. There'd be the full process. Nothing would be done overnight. It would all be done in the light.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Excellent. Council, any questions or comments for Mr. Harris on the plan or the process? Yes.
Sure.
Mr. Gasper.
I have some general comments. First, one thing to look at is that a city is never really done. We have a plan. If stuff gets built to our plan, that doesn't mean that that's the final state of Port Washington. There will always be a next future state. So we're never done. There's always something to come in the future. It's kind of as add to comes that like downtown is done. We have the largest collection of pre-Civil War buildings in the state of Wisconsin in downtown Port Washington. And we don't want to undo that in any way. But the reason that Port Washington is in that state today is because Port Washington stagnated for a lot of years, where other cities, those buildings were replaced with newer buildings, and ours just stayed. They were never replaced. And, downtown was fully built up until around 1950. And over the next 50 years after that, we tore down almost all the buildings that weren't on the main street. That's why the couple blocks over here are all parking lots today. Those were all filled with buildings. They were houses, they were churches, they were other businesses. They all got torn down. And when we look at a plan like this, we start considering, well, what if something was going to come back into those sites again, and it would not just be a parking lot forever. And that's what the plan is guiding us towards. It's to guide us if a developer comes and they want to develop something there, what do we want to see? You look at our plan, nowhere in there is a 10-story building. So based off of that, if somebody comes and proposes a 10-story building in there, we're not going to allow that because we have a plan that shows this is what we're expecting to see in downtown. As far as, one more thing with the plan like this. It's been said that no battle plan ever survives contact with the enemy. No city planning document ever survives first contact with the first developer. At that point, something is going to change. Either it's a good idea, it's a bad idea, or just a different idea. Stuff will change. In the same way a city is never done, this plan is never done. It's meant to be changed going forward. When we come up with a better idea, we'll adopt that and we can change the plan. This isn't locked in forever. The cost of the plan, there are parts of it that would be fairly expensive to implement. And how's it going to get paid for? I don't know. The idea of putting bridges across the harbor. you're looking at least a $5 million project to do that. I would never vote for city tax dollars to go and pay for that. If somebody wants to donate the money and set up an endowment to pay for maintenance on it going forward, I guess we would consider that. But even then, the Corps of Engineers and the Coast Guard may not approve that. So stuff like that is, it's an idea, it's in there, but there are costs to it. Some stuff's realistic, some's not. Some stuff might get paid for as a TIF, but TIF doesn't, and I'm the person on the council who's probably most weary of using TIF dollars for anything. But TIF does not mean a developer's incentive, and that's unfortunately what it's often been used for. But if you're building something like, say, along Main Street, if we're getting redevelopment there, and that area's already in a TIF, but say that's being redeveloped, we can use TIF dollars to implement, say, the plan that's on Main Street. And that, in those cases, the improvements that we make to Main Street are meant to improve the value of the buildings adjacent to it by more than what it costs, and thus it pays for itself. And that's really how TIF is meant to be used. It just often isn't. Also, talk about who's going to be here in 30 years to pay for it. I still plan on being here in 30 years to pay for it. I'll only be 75 then, so I hope to be here for another 30 after that. But I'm here for the long term. At least that's my plan. So I don't want to be paying extra in the future. So I want to make sure we're doing this, that it makes financial sense now. We had a couple questions on the idea of the roundabout at Wisconsin and Grand Avenue. I am a civil engineer. I've designed 5 roundabouts that have been constructed. What we were looking at here in the plan would be, because on the state highway, we have to follow WSDOT requirements. It would be a compact roundabout. So it would be about 80 foot in diameter. So everything in the roundabout and the road would fit inside of that. The right-of-way on Wisconsin Street is 80 feet. So that obviously fits within that intersection. The concern about it blocking the view, a compact roundabout like that would not have a center island that blocks traffic like the ones on the west side town where you have a big mound in the middle. This would have a mountable curb area that would typically be red concrete. It could be a fancy brick or something, but it's not raised. It's meant that trucks can off track over it to make it around the corner. So it's not going to block any views. In fact, right now, the overhead signals probably block more views than what a future roundabout would. The other thing, the paper had an editorial last week relating to this, showing the Viking Octantis outside of our harbor and saying that the plan could prevent that ship from coming into our harbor. That ship could not come into our harbor today. That ship drafts 19 feet, 8 inches of water. Our outer harbor on the charts is listed as being 13 and a half feet in deep. Now, it's deeper than that in a lot of parts, but that's what it lists. However, along Coal Dock, there we range from 15 to 18 feet deep. So the ship could not dock against the Coal Dock today. So any improvements that we would make to the harbor, we would look at ships like that. We want the ship like that to be able to come in. We would have to design to allow for that to happen. The St. Lawrence Seaway, the largest vessel that can come in through the St. Lawrence Seaway is a 740-foot vessel, 28 feet wide. St. Lawrence Seaway can draft 28 feet of water. We're probably not ever making our harbor so it can draft 28 feet of water. But any cruise ships that are on the lakes, they want to go to warm water in the winter so they can still make money. So any cruise ship in here is not going to be bigger than what can fit through the St. Lawrence Seaway. So we really don't need to design for larger than that going forward. So we could still protect the harbor and allow those large ships to come in. We just need to set the design criteria as to what we're heading towards. So, concerns about that we're destroying the city or we're preventing ships from coming in, we're not really doing that. The plan doesn't even go that far other than to show as a concept that this is something maybe we want to consider in the future. But we do take stuff like that into account, and we would, and make sure that, if we want cruise ships to come here, we would design the harbor entrance to make sure those cruise ships can come in here. Right now, you can argue we have a fair weather harbor, and it may be too rough for ships like that to even come in here. Last summer, we had 2 barges and a tug that broke loose off of Cold Dock Park. They smashed into each other, damaged each other, also damaged part of the seawall and the concrete sidewalk on top of it. And when you get weather like that, nobody's going to come in here with a cruise ship and dock along Cold Dock Park where they couldn't reliably or safely get several hundred people on and off the ship. So if we want stuff like that to come in here, we need to look towards the future and design for it. And the plan doesn't really design for it. It just gives us the concept of consider doing this. So that's what I got. Thank you.
That's the most you've ever spoken at a council meeting. I appreciate it. You had something to say. There'll be a quiz afterwards in the hall. All I heard out of that was that you plan on living to 105 years old, so.
I'm planning on living forever.
There's some books about that. No, but Mr. Gasper, I appreciate that, both the historical context and the other components as well. Just again, for the audience who came tonight to hear and recognize that this is a exercise in ideas and it's not static, so. Other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion to follow through on the staff recommendation to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Gasper, seconded by Alderman Newmeyer. Are any questions or concerns on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the motion passes. All right, that takes us into the last agenda item for the evening. Consideration and possible action of the developers agreement for Maritime Sheds LLC Industrial Condominium Development located at northwest corner of Maritime Drive and South Park Street. The Common Council is being asked to approve a developers agreement for the Maritime Sheds Industrial Condominium Development located in the city's industrial park, and the staff recommendation is to approve that agreement. Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is just an approval piece of the Maritime Sheds LLC industrial condo project that was recently approved by both council via the Plan Development Zoning and Plan Commission of Building and Site Plan. This is the developers agreement. The focus of this is largely on stormwater maintenance and civil engineering issues. This was shared with both staff internally and our city attorney, and also the other parties with Maritime. I don't have too much to add to that outside of that developers agreement and just the focus largely on the civil and stormwater pond maintenance issues and making sure that the association with those condo units are the ones maintaining those features.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. It was reviewed at Planning Commission. Any questions, or Mr. Newmeyer, anything to add? No, Mr. Benning?
I have a question. You've got items on the memo. It says key issues of the developers agreement involve the following. The third bullet, all unit owners, businesses, and organizations shall be approved by for all required uses and so on and so forth. Who is approving that?
As a collection of businesses, it's, prior to any occupancy, you come in, it's just checked for zoning, and so it's like any other business
So is it somebody coming to your office to?
Our city hall, if they're ready to pull an occupancy, or beforehand they know that a special zoning or entitlement approval is needed, it'll work for any other business.
Okay. Because I didn't know if this was the condo association, if it was somebody here. It's not clear what. It just says approved, and I didn't know by who.
It's just to highlight the fact that, these are condo units, they're individual businesses, and they're expected to follow zoning and get the proper approvals, just like any other business coming in.
So by the city?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion.
To approve.
Motion by Alderman Tierney. Is there a second? Mr.
Second.
Benning? Any questions or concerns on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. With that, we can go back into public comments and appearances. Is there any member of the public who'd like to make a comment? What, Yeah, no, the world's got to hear it because we videotape it. Thank you.
We're not? Okay. Jerry Zarin, I'm still Jerry Zarin, still live at Eva Street. I still want to say thank you, and I greatly appreciate that you took the time to clarify this all. And I feel a whole lot better knowing now what I know. And I did work with Bob right from the start with the ... And I know he's taken a lot of knives to his back, and I certainly appreciate all the hard work he did. And that was a good presentation tonight, and I thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Sri Vasudevan. I'm a relatively new resident to Port Washington and live on East Main Street. I just moved here in January after living 12 years in Mequon and 20 years in Belgium. So it's just my first common council meeting, and I really totally appreciated all the presentation and so on. And I would like to follow the point, if there's no change, there would be no butterflies. So we need change, and I think it was explained very nicely. And I just wanted to commend this group for doing the due diligence that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri. Other public comments?
It was interesting to talk about Coldock Park, and I think the question was asked if do we own it or not. And I don't know if we got an answer on that. There was some thought that, no, we don't, we being the collective Port Washington. But I just find it interesting that it's on part of the proposal, but yet you, Mr. Mayor, said, well, it's not happening. We're not going to do that at Coldock Park. I just found that kind of an interesting give and take. But the other deal is as far as extending the breakwater. So how much trial and tribulation did we go through to try to get the armor stone along the current break wall and the many flaming hoops that we, collective Port Washington, had to go through to get that armor stone, and yet didn't really do the job real well because that railing still gets beat up every winter. But we also have that thing at the end of the pier that I think we own called the lighthouse. And you know what's happening with that? You talk about millions of dollars that needs to be spent. Well, I heard that being talked in the past, and I don't know of any great movement on that. So if you're going to extend the break wall and redo that, you've got a lot of flaming hoops to jump through to get approvals and proper building from, as you mentioned, Coast Guard, Corps of Engineers, and all those other fine folks. It's interesting that when we moved here a decade and a half ago, my bride says, we're going to move there because it's a cute little town. I'm all for the nice ideas of change, but it's changing away from a cute little town. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments? Yes, sir.
I just had one comment to add. Thinking about it and listening to the presentation, one of the things, I think it was in the paperwork on the idea of that roundabout, was traffic calming. Well, I live in the 700 block of West Grand. If you want to calm traffic, slow things down from the railroad tracks west. I don't know if there's anybody from the Fire and Police Commission here. I can always tell when there's a squad car heading west. They don't have to have their sirens on. You can just hear that tut, 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 as the wheels hit the road. The problem is bar time at the bars down the street, and believe me, it's like the start of the Indy 500. So it's just a thought, something to think about for future. Okay, that would be a big help to the entire city. I mean, where I'm at, I'm well west of the downtown area. But boy, you see the cars come whipping through there. It's just amazing that nobody has been hurt or killed or serious accidents in there. I think it's just, luck of the draw, and hopefully it won't happen in the future. But as far as future planning, that would be something. And I'm going to guess that going up Wisconsin the other way because you got that long, the only speeding ticket I ever got in Port was coming back down there because it's so far and you just forget about it. But that's another area that I think long-term would be beneficial. So.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comments? Yes, sir. Should never speed on Spring Street.
You should never speed, period. Kevin Grady, 1300 Portview Drive, longtime Port resident. Family history goes way back. I just wanted to comment in regards to, I think when you read the press, you read the press and it stated this is all planning, this is nothing being set in concrete, and yet I think a lot of the comments that came forth were concerns that what was taking place tonight was setting forth a game plan that nothing could be changed. And so I think that brings home the idea that you need to be very prudent with the idea of keeping the ideas of what's happening here in your board very transparent to the public. And we had our discussions on a little square here that didn't go real well. I think the town's going through a lot of change. A lot of us are still waiting for a restaurant at Newport Shores to have a dinner overlooking a lake. And so they're anxious to see those things take place. But again, I think the Zaki Press kind of laid it out. This was simply a meeting of planning, organization, and setting forth a game plan, which can always be changed. But I think there was concern in the community that what was being done was setting forth a game plan that could not be changed. And so keep that in mind and let the community be aware of what's taking place so they can voice their opinion. So thank you on that.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing none, I just want to point out I appreciate Mr. Cosentine wearing the Port Washington City flag T-shirt tonight. And with that, I would call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Alderwoman and Mr. Newmeyer, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? This motion is adjourned. Go Pirates.